my friend June Knightley, and trigger warning for everybody listening to this, my friend June Knightley got shot while planning a Black Lives Matter protest. Yeah. And
Wow.
so that was the worst thing, and she died. She was shot point blank, and they were just playing the route. They weren't even doing the protest. They were just playing the route on what we were going to do for this protest.
Do you feel that people today are more accepting and more informed about the LGBTQ community than in the past? Or do you feel there's still a long way to go? Hello and welcome to Ego is Here. Today I'm joined by Belinda Carroll, a stand-up comedian, writer, and LGBTQ advocate who has been recognized for her outstanding activism. Belinda, thank you so much for being here. It's such an honor.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You know, I really admire stand-up comedians because I see how challenging it is to be fully dependent on the audience and being able to adjust in real time. I'm an actress myself, but I could never be a stand-up comedian, never ever. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, can you remember the first time you thought, oh, I want to be a stand-up comedian? Like, what drew you to stand-up comedy?
So this is actually a good story. So when I was about 20 years old, I was working at a job, and my manager was actually a stand-up comedian. And so I found out that he was a stand-up. And so we started talking about it. And at that time, one of the things he told me that was one of the luckiest things he told me is he'd been in it about 7 years. And he said, but in stand up, that's nothing. That's not even any years at all. And I was like, really? And I was, because I figured, say, if 7 years, you'd be, an expert. He's like, no,
Next
no,
for
no.
you.
Takes a really long time to be a good stand up. And so, anyway, so at the time, he was like, oh, you tell really great stories. You should do stand up. You'd be great at it. But I'm a vocalist too. I don't know if you knew that,
Yeah,
but
I know.
uh, yeah, so I've been a vocalist for a long time. So at that time, I was in a band, and I was 20, and I was being a vocalist. So, and I was from Portland, where stand up isn't, Portland, Oregon, where stand up isn't very, wasn't very established at that time. Now we have a great stand up community, but at that time it wasn't. And so I didn't really know how to go about it. So anyway, so that was the only conversation I had about it. So then a few years go by, and I'm in Austin, Texas, and I started going to open mics with an ex of mine. So my ex and I
Huh?
started going to open mics because they wanted to be a stand-up. So I started going to open mics, and I was like, I can do better than this. Like I can be funnier than this. So and so it was a bunch of and it was a bunch of dudes. I don't know if you know about stand-up, but stand-up's very male oriented, male
Yes.
focused. And uh, so anyway, so it was a bunch of dudes, and I was like, I can do this better than they can. And so anyway, long story short, I ended up at Cap City Comedy in Austin, and doing an open mic. And so that was kind of the beginning of that. And so I did like 3 minutes, and I was hooked immediately, and I started doing it after that. So
So there was no fear, no doubt. You just went for it.
oh, no, no, I was terrified. So I this is my thing, is that I actually kind of now at this point in my life, which this started kind of accidentally, but now I do it all the time, which is kind of I push toward things that make me afraid now, because of the fact that I was so terrified when I started stand up. But one of the reasons I started stand up was because I had really bad stage fright when it came to singing. And so with singing, your instrument is very dependent on your emotions, because you have to be able to take in air and let out air in a very
Yeah, you have to
precise
be relaxed.
manner. That's the way singing works. And so had a lot of stage fright, and so I was holding back a lot within music, because every time I would approach the stage, I would just get terrified. And so one of the reasons I started stand up is because I knew it would just scare the crap out of me. I don't know if we can cuss here, but but yeah, so I knew it was going to scare me. So I decided to do it in order to get over stage fright for singing. And so I wasn't expecting to be good at it, but to be invited to perform for money, which so I started getting invited to perform and actually getting paid to perform, like 3 months into stand up. And so,
Wow.
and not like a lot of money, but enough where it gave me the taste to want to do it, and so I wasn't expecting that. And so I had to really aggressively get over stage fright.
And how much time did it take you to just, get rid of that stage fright?
Um, I'm still waiting.
You're
I
so
don't think it ever like goes away. I think that you just learn to channel it. I mean, I don't know if I mean I don't get as nervous film acting or camera acting at all as I do with stage, because obviously your entire audience is in front of you at that moment. And so I think the experience is a little bit different, but it's always kind of terrifying to stand in front of 300 people you don't know and talk about your life.
It is.
And so I think that the real key to getting over stage fright, and this is true for I think everybody, is learning how to channel that energy into a positive performance as opposed to letting it scare you to the point that you can't give a performance. Does that make sense?
Yes, 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 yes.
And so that was my key. That was the real key to me, was that.
It makes perfect sense, but it's difficult, to put it in practice. Like,
Yeah.
'cause I'm an actress as well, but I always have that stage fright. At least the first 1 or 2 minutes, my legs are shaking,
Yeah, yeah,
feeling like it's the first time always. But yeah,
yeah.
so
So do you have that in the state in do you do stage acting as well as,
yes, yes,
film
yes, yes,
acting? Oh,
yes.
yeah, then yeah, exactly, it's the same thing. Now do you get it with film acting but not stage acting?
With film, I don't have a
I mean,
problem.
s
Stage, I
yeah.
mean, yeah, it's always yeah. Whereas there's those people around, so many people waiting for you, to perform. And, always my right leg starts shaking, and I'm trying to control it, you know? So but it takes about a minute and then it stops.
Oh,
So
that's good,
it
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So comedy is full of unpredictable moments. Has there ever been a weird, funny, or unforgettable reaction with an audience member that still sticks with you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we all have them, especially if we've been on the road. So I, I've been on the road a lot, and so I used to do a thing called Tribble runs, which was the reason it was called Tribble Run is because it was the booker was David Tribble, and so he used to do all of these little shows in like Montana
Uh-huh.
and middle of Washington and things like that, right? So I was on a run one time. I was on a tour with Tribble runs, and I was in Montana, and so as you know, you didn't, as you know, but maybe your listeners don't know, I'm queer, and so I founded the first queer comedy festival, and that's kind of my wheelhouse with comedy. And so I have a joke in my act about gay marriage in the Bible, and so I was doing this joke, and I was in the middle of this joke, and a guy with a red hat on, if you know what I'm
Mhm.
talking about, in the back, he said, and this is a small town, right? This is a very small, I wouldn't even, very small town in Montana. And this guy's in the very back at a high top, so I can see him straight. I can see him right at that stage. And he goes, "You know what? Forget gay marriage." And I'm using nicer language, but he goes, "Forget gay
Sure.
marriage." And then, right. And at first, for the first second, I was like, this is my nightmare heckler. This is somebody that's very vocal, obviously not my jam. This is going to be a problem. And so all these things are going through my head. And between the time I could think him to say that and me to think that and me to start saying something, this little woman in the front row stands up. I swear to God, actually, I talked to her after the show. She was 87 at the time. And so she stands up. She's about 4'11", and she stands up and she goes, "You know what, Larry? You need to shut the F up." And
Wow.
she silenced the whole room. and
So she handled the
anyway, so
situation.
yeah, and so everybody just started laughing, so I just went on. But I talked to her afterwards, ends up that she grew up in San Francisco in the early, like, 30s and 40s and 50s in San Francisco, and so she knew gay guys, and her mom was friends with gay guys. So
Wow.
she knew gay guys back in the 40s and 50s, and so anyway, so we ended up having a great conversation, but yeah, that was a primo moment on stage for sure.
So beyond the interaction with the audience, what do you think draws people to stand-up comedy compared to traditional theater? Why do they prefer more, uh,
I mean, as far as the audience or as far as the,
the audience?
stand-up? Oh, the audience, yeah. I feel like stand-up is more it feels more extemporaneous, and so it feels like something that's being created in the moment, and it is in a large way, you know? I mean, we have our bits that we've done and we've honed and that type of thing, and you know, you do write stuff down and you do write some stuff before you go on stage, but a lot of it is extemporaneous because it's such a in the moment art form that it's almost like if somebody had a painting that they painted all the time, right? They just had a painting they were famous for.
Mhm.
But instead of just creating that painting once, then exhibiting it, they had to create the painting live in front of you every time. Every time that painting would be a little different, right? And so that's kind of how I feel about stand up. It's like you're creating a painting and you may have like the rough draft of what kind of you want to do with the painting, but then the audience is gonna make the biggest difference in how that painting comes out. And so that's, I think, the joy of because in scripted theater, and I love scripted theater, don't get me wrong, but in scripted theater, uh, you know, you have your lines, you do your lines, and if you vary from your lines, then your director will become very angry at you.
Yes.
But
Yes.
with stand up, you know, it's just kind of like anything can happen, and then if something happens in the moment, and it's not being, you know, recorded at the time, and you have this like really because sometimes you just have really special moments with the audience, and those audience members are the only ones that are going to be able to experience that
Wow.
because it wasn't recorded because it wasn't, you know. And so I think there's something really special in that because then you carry that moment in you as opposed
Yes.
to having it just be for public consumption. So,
And I think that the people need that feeling of connection,
mhm.
you know, because they're
Yeah.
able to interact with you.
Yeah. And I think there is like a really definite connection to breaking the fourth wall that way because
Yeah.
you know with traditional theater, you know, of course you're maintaining that fourth wall really steadfastly, and so if you break the fourth wall, then that's a problem. The same with improv, you know, you don't want to break the
Yes.
fourth wall in improv necessarily either. And so yeah, so the breaking of the fourth wall is unique and the connection with the audience is really unique, and I feel
Yeah.
like that when people, and I have fans that are like this too, that come and see a lot of shows and things like that. And how they feel is they feel like they're your friend. They feel like they're your, you
Yes.
know, they
Yes.
feel like they're your buddy. And I want the audience to feel that way. And I feel like stand up is very unique that way. It's the only because even with singing, like, you know, with singing, I have the microphone. I'm kind of still separated from the audience a little bit because you're not necessarily delving into the deepest parts of yourself with singing. I
Mhm.
mean, you may be doing it emotionally and like for the audience, but you're not necessarily laying yourself out that way the same way that you do with stand up. And so, and I feel like that stand up is a unique experience with that too because you also are having that experience where you're getting even, I think, deeper for me as a vocalist and a stand up. I think I get even deeper than music with stand up,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know, emotionally.
Yes. 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 So comedy often comes from pain or struggle. That's what I believe. So has there
Yeah.
ever been a joke or routine that helped you process a deeply personal experience? Because I know you write your acts. So
Yeah. And so, yeah,
implement.
I do feel like that. So I feel like I so I came from a Southern Missionary Baptist family. I know you've read a couple of stories. So I was kicked out of my house when I was 14, or sorry, when I was 17. I came out when I was 14. So by the time I was 17, I was out of my house and stuff. And so I had a very contentious relationship with my family. My
Mhm.
brothers are all older than me, and they're all Republicans. So I grew up within
They
that, and
were a
so
lot
stand
older,
up.
right?
Pardon me.
They were a lot older than you. I think
Yes. So,
you're
yeah, my youngest to me brother is 7 years older than me, and then
uh
I've got a brother that's 10 years older than me, and then I have a brother that's 20 years older than me.
yeah.
And so he was essentially my what would be my dad's age. And in
Mhm.
fact, I've got a niece who's 4 months older than me because my brother was already married and having his first baby when my mom found out that I was a surprise baby. My mom thought she was going through the change, and so she was like 4 months pregnant before she even knew that she was pregnant because she thought she was going through the change. So, but anyway, so yeah, so I think stand up has really helped me repair emotionally a lot of the things that happened to me when I was a kid and when I first came out and that type of thing through laughing about them with other people. Because, a lot of the people that come to my shows are people that have been touched by trauma. And it doesn't even matter if it's necessarily my kind of trauma, like I got kicked out of the house or I came out as gay and people did, or whatever. It could be straight folks that have a lot of trauma. But I feel
Yeah,
like a lot of people need to laugh at their trauma because I
it's
mean, I'm
healing.
sure you've probably gone through stuff too, and it's one of those things where if you don't figure out a healthy way to deal with your trauma, you will figure out an unhealthy way to deal with your trauma. And
Yes.
so I feel like stand up is one of the healthiest ways to
Uh,
deal with trauma because you're taking it out, you're examining it, and you're going, ha ha ha, whatever happened to me doesn't matter because right now I'm laughing about it. Does that make
ex-
sense? Yeah.
exactly, exactly, exactly. It's healing. Yeah, it's like
It's very healing. Yeah.
letting go. So you were talking about your family, so I wanted to ask you, like, growing up, what messages did you receive about identity and belonging, and how did you push against them?
Well, I didn't receive great messaging for as far as any kind of identity and belonging stuff. So I received the message that I was not okay, that what I was weird in
Mm,
every way, like not even just being queer or being gay or that kind of stuff, but just I'm a voracious reader, and that was weird in my family. I have always been an intellectual and wanted to delve into subjects deeply, and so that's weird. My family emotions are so everything is kind of so that's kind of the broad idea that I got when I was a
mm,
kid. But then the beautiful thing was is that when I got into the larger community and I really learned about the world and I met other people like me, then it was just this blooming because I was able to push back against that and discover that there are a lot of people that feel weird. There are a lot of people that feel like they don't belong. And,
yes.
so I've kind of made it, and I think that I do this through stand up a lot. I've kind of made it my job to make other people feel like they belong because I don't want other people to feel that way. I think you grew up one of two ways when you grow up in an environment like that. I think you either one grow up in an environment where and you become that way and you want to make other people feel bad and feel weird, much like our current administration, or you feel like you want other people to feel belonging and feel joy and happiness around you, which is what I go for, because
Mhm.
I think you can reverse a lot of that damage for yourself by helping other people get over their own damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how was the time that you finally decided to come out? Like, when did that happen? And how was that experience? Which is terrifying for most people.
I started coming out when I was 14. But it takes a while because I feel like most people do this, but I came out to friends first. I came out to people I was in school with and things like that. And then I kind of, from there, started coming out to family. But my mom was kind of the last person I came out to
Right.
for what will become obvious reasons. But so I came out when I was young. So I speak sign language.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and so I've known deaf people for a really long time. And so my best friend in high school was deaf. So when I came out, I actually came out. I don't know if you have ever had deaf friends, but do you know what TDY is?
No.
TTY? Okay. So TTY is a telephone typing pad that deaf folks used to use before the internet, that
Uh-huh.
they type into it, and then you'd have a live operator as a hearing person on the other end. And then you'd say XYZ thing, and then they type it to your deaf friend, and then your deaf friend would type back, and then they would tell you what the
Oh.
person just said, right? And it
Mhm,
was a
mhm.
relay service, was called the relay service. And so I actually, the first time I came out to anybody, it was my friend Denise, and it was via TTY. So I was like talking to Denise is like, I want to, what do you want to tell me? And I said, I got to tell you this. I really need to tell you this and stuff. And, the operator's like waiting with bated breath. And I said, I'm gay. And the operator goes, and the operators aren't supposed to talk back at all. They're supposed to be a
Yes.
completely neutral
Uh-huh.
vehicle for you. And she goes, "Oh my god, really? Is this the first time you're telling her?" And I said, "Yeah."
Amazing.
So anyway, so that was the first time I came out was to Denise, and so after I came out to Denise, who was like my closest friend at that time, it became easier to come out to more and more folks, and so by the time I came out to my mom, I came out to my mom, and I was 15, so it was like a year after I came out to Denise,
Uh-huh.
and so essentially my mom, when I told her, my mom essentially said, "Oh, you're too feminine to be gay. There's no way that you could be gay because, everybody I've ever met that's gay is masculine." Like that was her. I know.
That's her
I know.
reaction?
I know. Well, she just said, she just didn't know gay people at
Yes,
all back
yes.
then. And so, anyway, and so, yeah, so that was her reaction. And so she was really upset. And then she expected me to, change completely. And, there was a
Read
lot
your
of
mind.
really damaging stereotypes about gay people back then. Uh, yeah, so I had to go through that. But then I really learned how to, and this is really important to today's, like, what's happening right now in
Mm,
today's society with all of these folks that are becoming um re-radicalized toward hatefulness, is the way that I got through that. And my mom actually became very much a uh advocate for me, and an advocate for the LGBTQ community,
mhm.
and knew trans people and knew drag queens and knew everybody and loved them all. The way that that happened was because I kept loving her even though she did not like me. And
Yes,
so as we're going through this moment, like, I know that it's hard to, like, look at everything going on and look at your parents who are now radicalized toward this ideology we don't like, and that type of thing. And I've met a lot of people whose parents have become radicalized toward this ideology uh since this whole thing went on, as opposed to it being a lifelong thing. The way to get over that is to love them through it, because they're gonna understand, because it takes just such an immense amount of energy to carry that amount of vitriol and that hate
yes,
within you,
definitely.
that even though they're kind of in this bubble wrap of cultism that tells them XYZ thing, most people aren't going to be able to keep up that amount of dislike toward their own family member, toward their own child, toward the people that they love. And so, because love is more powerful than hate. And it sounds
Yes.
cliche, but it's 100%
No,
true.
no, I truly believe that.
Right, and I think that's the only way we get through anything, right? And is to love our way through it. And so it's like, I know this is a hard time for us, but if we can love our way through it, and we can really show each other love and show people that are different than us, that are come from different countries than us and things like that,
Mhm.
and we can reach out to them and say, "You're welcome. You're welcome here. We love you here. We want you here." Then we can get over this. And once those people die out, which they will, uh then we will become uh, more community oriented and wholer as a society. And the
Uh-huh.
reason I believe that is because I've studied Germany after World War II, and the way that they rebuilt their society, and the way that they rebuilt their resistance to fascism and things like that, because they did rebuild their system to withstand fascism because of what happened. And
Yes.
so that's what I think our future is too. I'm hoping that we curtail it before anything more extreme happens, but you never know. But anyway, but that's the way I got through it. And so anyway, so yeah, so but I am glad that I went through it in one way, which is, I am glad I went through it because now with this specific moment, um, I know what's happening, and I know what's going to happen, kind of, and so I feel like I went through that in order to give other people hope that are going through it right now.
Exactly. You've poured like years of your life
Yeah.
in advocating for the LGBTQ community. Can you walk us through some of the work you're most proud of?
Oh, sure. God, I actually have a lot of a lot of work I'm proud of. So one of the things I'm most proud of is, of course, Portland Queer Comedy Festival.
Uh-huh.
And Portland Queer Comedy Festival started in 2017. It started out of a response to the first Trump administration. I've been building the queer comedy community in Portland for a long time, with other folks like Whitney Street, and other folks in Portland, Dolly DeLubel and Jenner Vesper. And so those folks came in with me and helped me with developing a huge queer comedy community in Portland. And so after years of producing large headliner shows with folks that were on TV and that kind of thing, I would
Mhm.
bring in these large headliners, and then we'd do shows, and then I would open for them. And so for years I did that, and then once I'd done that for a few years, I realized I had enough uh, connection to be able to do a queer comedy festival. And when I looked, I realized that there had never been a real queer comedy festival where it has been like, several days, several venues, many
Yes.
comedians, that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And I realized that I was like, I have enough queer comics that I know that are top notch headliner comics that I could literally have 50 comics over 5 days in five venues, and we could do a full queer comedy festival. And so that's what we did. So I was lucky enough that I had connections with a lot of the venues in Portland. And so a lot of the venues, Curious Comedy Theater and Kickstand Comedy, and a lot of the comedy theaters came on board. And we did an entire festival. It was in one neighborhood. Which meant it was walkable between all the shows. So it was a really big party, and after parties and all that stuff. So that helped. That was for 3 years that I did that.
Mhm.
And then COVID, of course, shut it down.
Yes, yes.
But in the meantime, we got coverage in the New York Times and USA Today, and a lot of national coverage for it. I was studied by a feminist comedy troupe in St. Petersburg, Russia, actually, who did a study for Goethe University about my comedy and activism combined kind of thing that I've always done. And it's so funny because the only reason I've always done that is because I was involved with planning the first Dyke March. There's a thing called Dyke March if you're anywhere other than like Portland, San Francisco, New York, that happens before the actual gay pride parade. That is
Mhm.
all people that identify as lesbian, dyke, queer, trans, that
Mhm.
come together and they march to specifically highlight the issues that lesbians and trans folks specifically go through outside of the gay and gay male community. And
Mhm.
so I did that for several years. So when I started with stand up, I just was like, oh, why don't I give 10% of my proceeds for my show to this queer organization? And uh, it wasn't a situation where I was trying to get publicity. It was just, I just was like, oh, I want to give money back to these people. So I just started doing that within shows. And so
Mhm.
when we did the festival, I did that in a larger way, and then did every show was like 10% toward a different charity and that kind of thing. So that's one of the things I'm most proud of. The other thing I'm really proud of, and I think this is really pertinent to a lot of folks everywhere, is I did I was one of the spearhead founders for the Q Patrol, which is a neighborhood community foot patrol in
Yes.
Portland that started in 2010. And essentially, the Q Patrol is a bunch of queer and ally neighborhood volunteers that do a foot patrol through our gayborhood, through our gay area, in order to dissuade people from homophobic violence. And so
Mhm.
we were having a real big problem with homophobic violence in Portland at that point in 2010, and that foot patrol helped curtail that violence from continuing. And I think that idea it has been replicated in other cities, but it should be replicated in other cities, especially
Oh,
right now when we see the uptick of all this stuff happening.
mhm, mhm. So, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced while advocating for LGBTQ rights, whether from society at large or even within the community itself?
Oh, um I've been pretty lucky. I mean I've experienced being uh gay bashed a few times.
Mhm.
So that's happened, but that's only spurred me really on to do more within queer activism. Um, but yeah, uh, I have had people, I've just had people call me a lot of names. I've been hit a few times, that type of thing personally. I did have a friend of mine who This was this is absolutely hands down the worst thing that's ever happened ever, but it didn't necessarily happen to me, but it happened in consequence of activism, which is my friend June Knightley. And trigger warning for everybody listening to this: my friend June Knightley got shot while planning a Black Lives Matter protest. Yeah. And
Wow.
so that was the worst thing, and she died. She was shot point blank, and they were just playing the route. They weren't even doing the protest. It was a they were just playing the route on what we were going to do for this protest, um, and so that was the worst. So yeah, and that's the thing is that that's the thing that people will do in order to make you silent, and they'll go through.
Well, yeah, I
eh,
mean, this is such a tragic event. I mean,
Yeah.
how did it affect you? I mean, and
Oh,
didn't
it was
want to
I mean, it's
quit,
still horrible. I'm
stop,
still about to
or
cry. Yeah, it's horrible. June was wonderful. She, had a partner and they had, a house and everything. And they've been together for, 20 some odd years. And so, it's really painful
did you
to,
feel like quitting at that time? I mean, did fear kick
no,
in? No, no.
I don't think at this point I could quit. I think that there's a lot worse going on than anything that I've ever experienced. And so in the world, and I think that there's
Yes,
some folks in Gaza that would like to quit. I think there's some folks in Ukraine that would like to quit. But you don't
yes,
have that
yes,
choice,
yes,
and I feel like that sitting pretty here in the United States in my nice little house, with my friendly roommates and my dogs and, in my nice little nonviolent neighborhood, is a luxury, and I think anything that I'm doing outside of within activism is in such a it's a safer place than anybody else is working from. And so I feel like that from my safety and my safety of my skin color, my safety of my citizenship, my safety of
yes.
my place that I live in beautiful California, all that stuff.
Mhm.
I think that my job is to put my skin color and my body on the line for people that can't do it. And I think that right now it's even more important to do that than ever. And so, yeah, so that's my feeling about that because I feel like that if I were to quit and say, oh, it's too hard, I got to quit, which is understandable, by the way. If you have mental health issues and you need to like not be engaged and stuff because it's hard for you, that's cool too. But like for me, I feel like that I would just be in my house feeling like I gave up, you
Okay.
know?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so
I know.
I'm hoping that there comes a time where I don't have to, where, I can just sit around and watch, Netflix
Yeah,
with everybody else
yes.
and just be a normal person. But until everybody's a normal person like that, then I don't have any desire to not do it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause, I would like to ask you, I mean, do you feel that people today are more accepting and more informed about the LGBTQ community than in the past? Or do you feel there's still a long way to go?
Well, I mean, I think that right
Because of the
now with
social media, all the information, but are they really informed? Are they accepting of,
I think that yes, I think that more people are more informed and accepting as a general rule. I think that people are way more knowledgeable than they used to be. I used to be when I first came out and probably until I mean, probably for like the first 10 years ish. I was always everybody's one gay friend that they knew, and they always had a trillion questions that were absolutely ridiculous about being queer or being gay or being a lesbian. And so
yeah,
I feel like that has all changed. I feel like that's been, people are understanding of the basics now. But I do think that there is a backlash that's happening, as you're seeing with, the Supreme Court or the Kim Davis filing to overturn gay marriage, and you have like the backlash against HRT and the trans community and things like that. And I feel like that backlash comes from knowledge. I think a
yeah.
lot of those folks were not aware of us before, and now they are, and they're like, "What?" So I
Yes,
think that
yes.
that is a thing, yeah. But I think that again, I feel like that probably 85% of people are accepting. I feel like that there's probably, a vast majority of the population that is accepting. I feel like that the people that aren't accepting are just people that are willfully ignorant, and they attack anything that scares them. And it doesn't matter if it's somebody from Mexico or if it's trans
Yes,
woman, it
yes,
doesn't
yes.
matter. It's just people that scare them, they're going to attack. And
Mhm.
that's on them. That's not on us. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so, yeah. So, but I feel like that overall, I feel like people are more aware. And I also feel like that people are becoming more and more accepting because they see the hate that we're dealing with. They see the ways that people are treating us, and they go, "Oh, I don't want people being treated like that." Because I do have a uh, feeling that the majority of people are trying to do their best in the world, in their
Yes.
lives, you know?
I think that there are a lot of people who I won't say pretend, but they want to be accepting, but deep inside, they're still questioning,
Yeah.
yeah. So, because for some people, all those this thing with inclusivity is, trendy and it's nice, but I don't know if they're really getting the point, and you know, what
Yeah.
would
I
happen
feel
if
like
somebody close to them would come out? How would they react? Because sometimes
I
when this is something that is not happening in your family or in your
Mhm.
environment, it is completely different than, you
When
know.
it's your family for sure. Like, I
Yes.
feel like, yeah, I feel like that's true. Well, I mean, there's an intellectual logical acceptance of just a lot of things, but there's an intellectual logical acceptance to things, and then there's a complete acceptance down to your bone marrow acceptance stuff. And so I feel like there's a lot of people that are logically or intellectually accepting of gayness. They go, "Oh, yeah, I get it. Like, I get some people like this," but
They cannot
the
process it.
reality of it being
Like,
in front of them, or
mhm,
for
mhm,
their daughter or son to come out, or that type of thing, that brings it from intellectual exercise into reality, right? And so that is where you get into the deeper layers of being confronted within your own ideology, right? Because
mhm,
your ideology can extend to being a logical ideology where you can understand something, or it can be a real psychological ideology where you really accept it as what you believe, right? And but there's layers to that. So you can get to a point where you get exposed to somebody who is different than you in whatever way, and
mhm.
say, "Oh, I accept that guy even though he's XYZ thing."
Yes.
But then when you're confronted with it, then
Mm,
that's where the knowledge goes deeper, and that's where you have to do more and more work to work through the feelings that you're having and understand where those feelings are coming from. Because a lot of people are raised religious, like such as me,
yeah,
but a
yes.
lot of people were really raised in a religious household of whatever stripe. And I'm specifically looking toward Catholics who have gone through a lot of changes in the church in the last, 10, 15 years
Mhm,
around queerness, because it was completely okay to kick out your family or kick out your kid for being gay in the Catholic Church in the year 2000. So, and that's not that long ago. So,
you know.
uh, I had a partner for several years who was Catholic. Her family was all very Catholic. Her mom was from Mexico, and her dad was Irish, but they were like both very Catholic and involved with the Catholic Church and knew priests and like all the things. And then she came out, and then she had to like work through coming out with them. And they
Mhm,
were very lovely, lovely, lovely people. But that was okay in the Catholic Church at that time. And so they had to make the decision to not do that. And they had to make the decision to continue to support them, even though the
mhm,
church was telling them it's something else. So anyway, but yeah. And so when you're raised with that kind of depth of depth of learning that it's a sin and it's a this and it's a that, then you really do have to do some deep work. And internally, even as a gay person, you have to do a lot of deep work to understand that that isn't a true thing, and that was taught from a different perspective than the one you live in. And
yes.
that, you can forgive yourself and feel like a whole person and feel like a person that's 100% as equal as anybody else, but you do have to do that work.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, being a queer woman in comedy, is it still rare?
Yeah, I mean, well, this is the thing is that I feel like it's becoming less rare.
Mhm,
About I think the statistic is about 30% of Gen Z identify as some stripe of queer. And
mhm.
so they identify somewhere on the LGBTQ stand spectrum. And when I was a kid, it was like 5 to 7%. So, so I feel that, and by the way, I don't feel like more people are gay. I feel like more people are more comfortable in talking about being
Yeah,
queer.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just because people are like, oh, so many people are gay now. It's like, no, everybody was gay
No, no,
before.
no,
They
no.
just didn't talk about it. Yeah. And so I feel like that there's way more people that identify as gay, and more people are willing to talk about gay feelings too. I have a few straight guy comic friends that I'm friends with who are who talk about, like, I experimented with being with a man once just to see if I was, but they'll
Yes.
talk about it out loud now, which is something that used to never happen.
Yeah, mhm.
And so I feel like that there's more visible LGBTQ people in general. So I think that that automatically kind of ups the amount of queer people that are in comedy. But I do feel like there's a lot more successful people that are LGBTQ and specifically gay and trans that have gotten to a high point in their career that would not have gotten to that point just 10 years ago. And
Um,
so I feel like that there's a lot more people in the upper echelons of entertainment that are succeeding, which I love to see, of course.
yes.
But that has really changed in the last 10, 15 years.
Mm. Have you ever felt the weight of, representation?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that does this and is kind of the face of LGBTQ ness is does feel that way. I went through a period for a while, because in Portland I was the founder of the Queer Comedy Festival. I also was the director for the Dyke March in Portland for 12 years. And then I also worked with Portland Pride on a lot of stuff. And so I was kind of like my entire life was very professionally gay at that point when I
Mhm,
left
mhm.
Portland. And so I did go through a period when I first moved to Southern California where I didn't do anything with Pride. I haven't done anything with Pride yet since I've been down here. I've done my activism in a lot of different ways, but not in the same ways because of the fact that I felt very burnt out and uh, very tired, I guess. Just, I mean, I just,
It's
I felt so overwhelmed with being so publicly gay all the time that
mhm,
I just
mhm.
needed a break from being publicly gay. I just
Yes.
needed to be just a normal Belinda for a while, and I think that's fair. I think that everybody that does this work in whatever way you're doing it goes through that because it's a large emotional uh, burden to carry a lot of
Mhm,
times
mhm.
because you do feel you do I do feel like I feel when somebody when I read about somebody that's gotten gay bashed or hear about a trans woman getting unalived and things like that, I feel that emotionally. And so I do carry that with me. And so I don't think you come from this. I think if you consistently do this kind of work for a long time, whether it's acting or comedy or activism, it's all coming out of passion, right?
Yes, yes.
You have to have a driver. You have to have a
Mhm.
passionate driver to be able to do it. And so,
Yeah, 'cause you're
uh,
facing so many obstacles that if you don't have that drive, I mean, that's what it
you'll
keeps
just give up. You just
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you'll go get a job in an office and go to work 9 to
Mhm,
5
mhm.
and just be a normal person.
Yeah,
And so so you do have to become emotionally resilient to do this work. You have to be emotionally resilient and you also have to be forgiving of yourself and other people to be able to wake up the next day and do the same thing over and over again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Belinda, how do you protect your mental well-being? Like, how how are you able to stay grounded and, I don't know if you ever been through depression or
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
let's talk
so
about that because
I have a
there are a lot
therapist.
of us struggling with,
Oh,
mental
yeah,
health.
I think that being a thinking person makes you depressed
Mhm.
because you can understand everything that's going on in the world, so it's one thing. But I feel, so I have a therapist, I've seen therapists on and off for 10 years. And 100%, I always tell people having a therapist is like having a best friend who's legally obligated not to tell anybody your stuff.
Yes,
You know? And
yes.
so that is a main thing. I also do a lot of guided meditation. But the biggest thing I did, and a lot of people will not agree with this, if you're still doing it, but I quit drinking. I quit drinking all alcohol 10 years ago, which was incredibly helpful for my depression because,
Mhm.
like I said, as a thinking person, like all you want to do is shut off that part of your brain that's constantly
Yes, yes.
going.
That's
And
right.
so drinking is one of the easiest ways, cheapest and most legal ways to do that. And so I ended up being a person that just drank, and also just being in comedy clubs all the time. And a lot of times you get paid in drink tickets, and
Mhm,
you
mhm.
are, or the bartender likes you a lot and decides that drinks are on him for the night, which happened to me trillion times. And so you end up in a situation where you just have a lot of access to alcohol and drugs. And
Mhm,
so
mhm.
10 years ago, I made the decision to, I'm California sober, just to be clear. I'm not sober, but I am sober from alcohol and all other drugs. And that was the best thing I ever did for both my career, because that's when I started the festival. That's when things started really taking off for me, but also for my mental health and being able to think clearly and think through all of this stuff because I don't have that depressing me further.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, when I quit drinking, increased my anxiety.
Yeah.
Like, whenever I had a glass, I don't know, of wine or whatever, next day, my anxiety would skyrocket. So,
Yep.
you know, so I
Yep.
stopped and I felt better. Like,
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, it's hard to be able to navigate through all those emotions. You've been through a lot. You're coming out, being able to advocate for everyone. Being in the forefront. Um, so, what would you advise younger people, or no matter the age, to people who really want to come out but don't know the way, are afraid to do so? What would you tell them?
Well, first off, I've known a lot of people that come out older. In fact, I have a friend named Jack who him and his partner have been together for 20 years now, but he came out after his wife died. And so he didn't come out until he was 63, and he's 83 now. And he was extremely involved with the LGBTQ community in Austin, which is how I met him. And so there's never an age too old to come out. I feel like if you can come out, when you feel free enough to do it, because there's so many complicated reasons to not come out, that coming out is an act of bravery. And so my advice to people that are coming out is make sure that you have a really good support system around you before you come out, to people that are maybe don't have the best interest of your best interests in mind. Always come out to the people that have your best interests in mind first, so you feel safe when you come out to the people that don't. But two is that coming out can lead you to the wholest expression of yourself. And
Mhm.
so if being your wholest person is a goal for you before you pass off and shuffle off onto the mortal plane, then I would suggest doing it, because as painful as it is, as hard as it is, as much as it takes for you to be honest about who you are, being honest about who you are is absolutely one of the best things you can possibly do for yourself. Hands down.
Yes.
I had a mom who grew up in West Virginia pre-feminism, who came to Oregon alone with a child as a single mom, and had to like really throw away her whole past life and create this new life and things like that. But she was beholden to her husband. And so she could, because it was pre women could have bank accounts, so she couldn't
Mhm.
even have a bank account until 1974. So she, was stuck being whoever she needed to be to stay safe and stay housed for her kids. And so I've always considered it. And she had a after I came out, she had her time where she really kind of like started to becoming who she was and things like that.
So, you host the podcast My First Gay Bar.
I
What
do, yeah.
inspired you to create it, and what kinds of stories are you most passionate about sharing through it?
Uh, I started it about 2 years ago, and I'm actually reviving it now on YouTube. This is a great entrance into this because so I was doing it via audio podcast, which was
Cool.
actually going really well. Uh, because so the people I want to talk to are people that essentially that have a good experience, a good story about a first experience going to a gay bar. But the reason I'm talking about the first time at gay bars is because for a lot of gay people or for a lot of queer people in general, when they go into a gay bar, it's the first time they're in a room full of somebody like them. And so the reason I wanted to talk about it was because for a lot of people, that's a very coming of age moment is going to your first gay bar and really seeing gay people in their natural environment and doing the whole thing. And so I wanted to talk about that. And uh, the stories that I'm interested in are stories uh, that people found community at their queer establishments because I feel like and I don't even feel like there's a massive closing of all of these bars that we've all grew up in and learned how to be people in. And so there's in fact right now there's two bars in Portland that are LGBTQ bars that are closing like this month
Mm.
because people just don't have the money to go out like they did. And we're also just, we're dealing with even if they don't say it, we're dealing with a recession. And so, we're dealing with people not having enough work and jobs being, laid off and fired and all that stuff right now. And so there's people that, a lot of people don't have the money to go out and spend
Yes.
$100 at the bar or whatever now. But the problem with that is because our bars have been our community gathering centers for so long, then you're losing the community aspect. And with everything being so remote now,
Mhm.
it's hard to feel there's a really good article, and I think it was in Psychology Today, talking about the death of the third place because we used to be able to go, home, work, and then we'd have a third place that we always hung out at, like the local watering hole or that kind of thing. And we don't we're losing that as a society. We're losing that, and a lot of that's TikTok and the internet and all that stuff. But it's creating a loneliness epidemic because we don't have a community place that we just go and see Bob that we don't work with, but we met at the bar, right? And
Yes.
so one of the things that I wanted to talk about with my first gay bar is that community. How do we create that community outside of the gay bar? How do we do that? How do we recreate the connection that we have at a bar in a place that isn't the bar,
Yes.
and so that's where my first gay bar is. It's a place where people can come together and talk about how to build community outside of bars, but also acknowledge that we had some great times in bars, and they're also a necessary place as far as building society and as far as building community.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. So, when all the noise fades, the shows, the events, the activism, what truly makes you feel at peace?
um, I feel like having home makes me feel at peace, and it's not necessarily a dwelling place that I live, but it's
Mhm.
it's feeling at home within myself and feeling like I'm being the most authentic version of myself, and also just being able to be in a conflict-free zone and be able to be in a peaceful home where everybody respects each other and
Yes.
everybody encourages and supports and lends each other a hand, and that's what makes me feel at peace.
Great, great. So, do you think you found happiness, or are you still searching for it?
I I feel happy. I feel like I've come very close to finding my own happy place, but I feel like that there's more to do. I'm always striving. I really, I really want to take my career further and do TV and film, and I really want to, expand my first gay bar and make that into a success. So there's definitely things that I'm striving for, but I think that that's different than happiness. And I feel
Yes.
like my happiness comes from the people around me, and just I just been so blessed with this wealth of people, and the people that care about me, and people that care about my opinion and things like that, that I think that that's where my happiness lies.
Mhm, mhm. So, Belinda, thank you so much for being here. Thank you
Yeah,
very
no,
much.
thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. This is super fun, and please let me know when this is out, and I'll get it all over everything.
Great. So for all of you who stayed here with us, remember, ego is here, you are here, and that's enough.